Greetings, my name is JC,
And I'm Ian.
and this is the Gamer's Gaiden. In this episode, we're going to be talking about The Night in the Woods. But before we start, I'd like to mention if you do like our content, be sure to like and subscribe and comment down below. It really helps us out with the YouTube algorithm. And share the content with other people who you feel would also enjoy the content. But before we get into A Night in the Woods, Ian, what have you been playing?
Just a couple of things this week.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing too crazy. Graveyard Keeper came out on the Switch.
Right.
So I picked that up because it's like I don't know, kind of a crooked Stardew Valley.
Oh, okay.
So I haven't put a whole lot of time into it. I'll talk a little bit more about that when I'm a little bit further.
Cool.
But something that I did spend a little bit more time with was my friend Pedro.
Oh, okay. And what's that about?
Also on the Switch.
Nice.
It's like a kind of like Katana Zero.
Okay.
The same kind of like fast-paced action.
Mm-hmm.
But not like pixel graphics. It's very, or I guess semi-current looking.
Okay. Is it like 2.5D or?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And yeah, it's more point-based.
Okay.
So you get combos by moving through quicker,
Mhm.
and that gets you more points. And you're less worried about how am I going to get through this section, more of how can I kill everybody in as fancy a way as possible to get as many points as possible.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, it's kind of interesting. You have a pair of pistols, which you have unlimited ammo for.
Right.
And then you kind of pick up other weapons as you're going along.
Mm-hmm.
You can free target with the left thumbstick. So
Okay.
you hold down, I believe, like one of the triggers.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can like free aim with that.
Oh, okay.
And, or no, you free aim with it and then you lock on.
Oh, okay.
So it like holds onto that target.
Right.
So if you're dropping down and you've got like dude on this side and dude on this side,
Right.
you can like split aim.
Okay.
So you can like lock onto this one, so your one weapon's gonna aim at that,
Mhm.
and then you can aim independently over at this side.
Okay.
So as you drop down, you can do this cool like, and yeah,
Cool.
and it's got the like bullet time, so you can slow time down as well. Lots of neat like ropes and skateboards and
Cool.
zip lines. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's kind of dumb. Story's super weird. There's a talking banana that he's your friend Pedro. He
Oh, okay.
kind of is what progresses the story.
Nice.
But story, it
It's just
kind
a
of
background element.
it sort of feels like it's like a combination of like Hotline Miami and like Tony Hawk, or
Oh,
like
okay.
one of any of the like point collecting extreme sports games,
Right. Okay.
just with murder, because it's like your score is very much what like dictates the end result of your level. Not
Oh,
like
okay.
story wise, but just like yeah,
The result on
it
whether
gives
or
you
not
your
get,
rating. Yeah,
an S or something or an A or.
yeah. So
Okay.
far, I've just been getting a lot of C's. I'm really not good. But what's great is like at first it was like C is for coconut,
Oh, okay.
and it now just tells me that like C is for do better next time.
Aw.
Yeah. But it's a lot of fun. If you enjoy that kind of like run and gun sort of gameplay, I think you'd dig it. It reminds me a little bit of Shadow Complex
Okay.
from like, I don't know, a bunch of years ago. That was way more like Metroidvania-y,
Okay.
whereas like this is not. There's no going back to collect stuff. It's
Right.
just like plow straight through. But a lot of the visuals, the aiming mechanics, that kind of stuff,
Mhm.
it gives me the same kind of feel. Plus, you can kick stuff at people.
Oh, okay.
Yet again, another game that has a basketball net that you can kick stuff into.
Oh, okay.
No achievements on the Switch though, so
Right.
there's no.
There's probably one on the PS4 or something for that.
Oh, I mean, probably.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what consoles it's or what platforms it is out on.
Mhm.
It is on the Switch for sure, but yeah, check it out if that halfway interests you at all. I've been having fun with it, and I look forward to kind of finishing it.
Cool.
JC, what have you been playing?
So my friend came over a couple days during the week, and we played some Samurai Showdown. That was
Nice.
basically the main game that I've been playing, other than the game that we're going to be talking about. So yeah, we got together during the week, and yeah, we just did some 1v1s and played a handful of matches, and yeah, it was really really fun.
Nice.
And got to play some other characters that I haven't necessarily played yet, and yeah, he seemed to be enjoying it, and yeah, just having a good time with that. But the other thing that I did this week was I made you a Mario Maker 2 level, and you gave me the inspiration that you didn't want to see a lava pit. So,
Yeah, I said, cool, JC, just don't make me a lava pit that I'm going to instantly die. So what does JC do? He makes a lava pit in which I instantly die. Solid friend.
yep. So, unfortunately, there isn't a recording of this, but the idea is that I'll hopefully have that fixed for the next segment or episode whenever I make you another level. But yeah, the software's not working. So
You know what I really hate, JC?
what's that?
My least favorite level type is things that are like, I don't know, moderately easy that you can finish with
Okay.
with little struggle. I hate those so much.
Yeah, me too. They're so boring, and I'll probably never make one. So,
I tried.
but yeah, I guess tell the viewers about the level.
Honestly, it was pretty good. Yeah, I died instantly, and I died a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Probably,
you beat it in like 10 to 15 tries or something.
I think it probably took me 20 minutes,
Yeah.
maybe 30. It was a lot. It was a lot longer than I thought I was going to. JC asked me if I was going to quit once, and I said yes. And
then
then I
you
said
didn't.
no.
Yeah, you put the controller down.
I did. I put
on
the
the
controller down
table,
twice.
and you were like, "I'm done." I'm like, "Are you?" No.
Because I don't want it to beat me. I hate it when something beats me, and I'm just like, nah, I'm
Yeah.
done with this.
And I know you mentioned that you're not necessarily a person who plays Mario games a
That
lot.
was the literal
So,
like
I didn't-
as I'm playing through, literally one of my comments was, at any point in our entire friendship, did I ever make some kind of did I ever allude to you that I'm good at platforming games? Because I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not. I played a bunch of Meat Boy, and I got good at Meat Boy.
Right. And
But
I
that
knew
was
you had
years
played that
ago.
game, but I wasn't sure if you had beaten it. And to be fair, I did modify the platforming. Like I showed you a couple parts where like it was much harder.
He made it harder, and then he made it easier because he's like, oh, this idiot's not going to get through it. And I still didn't for a long time.
Yeah.
But no, it was a lot of fun. The challenge was there. It does have a coin mechanic where you have to have so many coins to finish the level, which makes it so much harder.
Mm-hmm.
Because I did complete it once.
Yeah, but you were
without-
short like 5 or 6 coins.
It was 12. I remember the
Oh, was it?
exact
Okay.
number because I was very angry. Very
You
angry.
were very angry.
Yeah. Yeah, that wouldn't have made it past the filters. No,
Yeah.
it was still good though. JC's gonna add the code somewhere down in the description.
Or as
So-
the main comment.
Yeah. If you have Mario Maker 2 and I don't know, you want to see how bad I am at video games, download it, check it out.
Yeah, try it. Give me your input on what you think about the level. And
When you blow through it in your first attempt, you'll be like, "Oh, Ian's horrible at video games." I get it, I am, but no, it was good. I look forward to playing more.
yeah, I'll have another level for you next week. Which you told me you want to see a water level.
I do want to
so
see a water level because I know that you don't like water levels,
I don't like Sonic water levels
All
because
right.
you run out of breath and it's just annoying.
whereas I never have issues with Sonic water levels.
Hmm.
The key is to hold your breath at the same time.
That's what you've told me. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's what gets you through it.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, so let's get on to the main segment of the episode, A Night in the Woods.
A Night in the Woods.
So it was your idea to play this game. And,
Actually, I think this might have been yours because
Was it?
we were talking
we had an
uh,
idea for this episode probably like a month and a half ago.
something like that. Well, because we
And-
just finished I had finished Life is Strange
Mhm.
fairly recently, and I believe you said I'd heard A Night in the Woods is kind of similar,
Yeah.
and I was like, cool. Like maybe we'll do another like episode long discussion on a game.
Yeah.
And we can both play A Night in the Woods because
Mhm.
I know we both had a copy of it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I played my copy on GOG, and you played
played
yours
mine on the Switch.
Yeah.
On the Switch.
Yeah, and
Always on the Switch.
I will say about the computer version, I would definitely connect a controller to it. And the reason why is because there's some controls with it, especially with the which we'll get into a little bit later. But the guitar mini game, it
Yeah.
switches over to the 1 2 3 4 for the actual controls of the guitar notes, and I found that really really hard to do in comparison to just hitting the 4 buttons on the right side of the controller.
I mean, we'll
So
get into it later, but
yeah,
I found
yeah. So if you do play it on the
controller
computer,
hard too.
then but yeah. So let's talk about first off, what is this game about? So the main character May is a cat. Every person in this game is like
Just all anthropomorphic animals.
yeah, which is really really cool. And what's weird about the game too is that there's like actual animals as well.
Yeah,
In
there's
the
wild
game.
animals wandering
Yeah.
around. Like there's squirrels that you see frequently,
And cats and
and
dogs
yeah,
and
but
like
there's
rats and
also
stuff.
cat and dog people.
Yeah, yeah, and bird people.
Yeah, and
Um,
as well as wild birds. Yeah,
yeah,
like it's
yeah.
just
But yeah, so
so
it
strange.
it takes place in this small town that the main character May is from, and she's recently dropped out of college, and she's come back home, and odd occurrences have been happening. Her former friend from like middle school and high school, Casey, from her past, has gone missing, and is also a friend of one of your good friends, Greg, and they're concerned about Casey missing, and that's kind of like the preliminary setting of the game, and it takes the player through a few weeks essentially of life as May and the interactions between like her and the town and its people. And
And
that
there's also some big secrets too that are like alluded to right at the beginning,
yeah.
like some kind of event in May's past.
hmm Yeah, because they don't really talk about
Even May leaving school.
yeah, they never really talk about
That's
exactly why certain things are the way they are until much later in the game, which is kind of nice because there's like large reveals later on in the story of the game.
yeah.
Yeah, which is kind of cool. And as an interesting note about the game and its premise, Possum Springs is actually semi-based on the Pennsylvania Rust Belt area, and it's slightly autobiographical of its two main writers, Scott Benson and his wife, Bethany Hockenberry, who grew up in that area. And the game itself, as I mentioned, is kind of slightly autobiographical because they grew up in that area, and some of the issues that are addressed in the game, from what I understand, are things that like, well, like I've certainly lived through some of them, and like a lot of people our
Yeah.
age have, and stuff like that. And that's what I found really, really interesting about this game.
Yeah, that was the easy thing for me was it's like Life is Strange was emotional
Mm-hmm.
and it was a lot to take in, but this there was so many discussions in that really kind of like hit home.
Yeah. So, what were
Some
your preliminary thoughts with this game?
I mean at first I didn't really know what it wanted to do.
Yeah,
You know,
I kind of got the same feeling because
it's
it's a
very
little.
like loose
Mm-hmm.
when you
And
start.
some May herself is a little bit unsure about herself and slightly distracted. And because of that, I think they portrayed that fairly well, where it kind of made me a little like unsure of as to where exactly this was going, because
Yeah,
it's.
like there's not a lot of like guidelines. It's not
Mhm.
like, oh, you really need to go do this, or there's not objectives.
Yeah,
There's just suggestions.
yeah, and you play through very like basically you play through mundane life in the game, which is really interesting too. I found that was an interesting aspect of its gameplay because you walk around and stuff like that. We'll
Yeah,
get
you just
to
kind of
gameplay in a
wander
sec.
around and talk to people and
Yeah.
get yourself involved in situations.
hmm
And yeah,
Yeah.
it 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 took a little bit to get its hooks in.
hmm
My first kind of play session, because I started playing this before you,
Yep.
quite a bit before you, and I had probably put in 2 hours um, before we really discussed that we were gonna do this.
Yep.
And
Yeah, because we weren't sure what episode we were gonna do it with, but we
yeah,
wanted to play it like at the same time.
and
So.
I'd probably put in 2 hours prior, and
hmm
then I really like dove into it this past week. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
um, that the first 2 hours I found didn't quite grab me,
Mm-hmm.
and then it's yeah, you just start getting more and more of the story and more of these interactions with the characters, and it
Right.
really pulled me at that point. What about yourself? Like, what's
So I enjoyed the initial moments. It became fairly noticeable to me fairly quickly, like after that, like 2 hour mark, basically. The kind of like that was going to go over like certain themes and stuff like that. But the game actually surprisingly quickly made me depressed, and I actually couldn't play the game in one sitting. For context, the game takes between like 10 and 12 hours if you do most of its content. You can miss some of the content by like not talking with people and stuff. But yeah, I basically like I was talking to you about it, and basically what I did was I would play like a day in the game and then like watch 2 episodes of like Stranger Things, and then I went back to the game and I kept on going back between the two things just so that I didn't have to like fully focus on like the concepts, just because it deals with a lot of different topics, which we definitely go into a lot more detail later. But yeah, I found it more interesting than fun to play. Yeah, I guess I would say, because of the concepts and stuff like that the game goes over and how it goes over those concepts.
yeah,
Yeah. So, and I one thing I would say with the preliminary thoughts, I immediately noticed that you actually walk from right to left instead of the normal way, which is left to right. And I found that
yeah,
really interesting because the first thing that you know about the game's character, May, is that she's coming back from college. That's kind of a regression, it's backwards.
yep,
And you're kind of trying to like go back to the way things were. And you're walking from right to left, and that kind of parallels that thought. And like even whenever you walk out of the house, you walk over to the left in order to go back to the town and stuff like that. And it's kind of like yeah, May is stepping backwards in life and not forwards without potentially knowing it. And I found that parallel, there's, to me it felt very intentional. I'm sure it was.
that's kind of true. Because if and when you eventually can go right,
Hmm.
it actually takes you right out of town.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and there are some people in the town which are very um uh aspiring to leave or wish that they could leave, and necessarily can't due to certain conditions and stuff like that. And yeah, in order to do that, like the way that the game is designed, like if you continue to go left, eventually you get into the woods, and then if you go right, it's like towards the new highway or whatever that passes the town and stuff.
Yeah, it takes
um
you right out of
and it
town.
takes you right out of town. So let's talk about the gameplay. I'll start with this. There really isn't any, in my opinion.
It's
Um,
true. No, it's
yeah,
this would have just as easy, like it could have just as well been um like a film.
I don't know if I agree. And the reason why I kind of disagree with that is it could have been one, but I don't think it could have touched on the same subjects because, for example, you can show ignoring certain people and stuff like that, or choosing to go with one friend or the other, but the actual forcing of that choice and that being your choice, I
I
think
guess
makes
that's
it
true.
more
Yeah.
of
No,
a thing.
it does.
Yeah,
It makes it hit home a little bit harder.
yeah. Because basically, with the gameplay, there's two major paths. One is with your friend Greg, and one is with your friend Beatrice. And you can kind of do half and half between the two, where you don't really complete either of those.
Yeah.
But the main two are one or the other old friends from school, and the game is very, very dialogue based. And it's kind of like a story that unfolds before you, which is kind of like why it's like a movie or like a TV show or something like that.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that it's in a game format, in my opinion, because you have the ability to basically decide whether or not you're going to not talk to your mom, or spend time with your parents or whatever, which is something you can or don't have to do.
Yeah, that's
And
true. You don't have to interact with your parents at all.
yeah, and with your friends, and kind of like how you interact with your friends, the dialogue choices are necessarily, you only really have one or two choices, which is kind of like Oxenfree. But I didn't really have a feeling that it affected anything holistically like Oxenfree did. I felt like it actually had better dialogue changes depending on your one of three choices versus it kind of just changed the like immediate uh, dialogue after your choice and not really anything else, which was fine.
Yeah.
But I just felt that it kind of just was put there to break up the monotonous reading essentially so that
Yeah.
you
No,
kind of
that
like
that
had to
kind of
think
makes
about
sense.
something. Yeah. um and yeah, I'm not sure if this was on purpose, but it it seemed to just to only really matter for any of the dialogue choices if it related to basically Greg or Beatrice. Yeah. Yeah. Other gameplay aspects is that
So
there's,
some very light platforming.
yeah, very light platforming, and it's mainly exploration in the
Yeah.
sense of platforming because you have this entire town that's a few like sections, and you can discover many different things within that town. For example, you can discover um, different people. Like one person really likes poetry and has kind of in between jobs, and you can like listen to her backstory and
Well, there's your old science teacher who
mhm,
hangs out on a rooftop
yeah, every other day.
every other day. Yeah, but you have to get up to him.
Hmm.
So you actually have to like climb across the telephone poles and then like jump onto.
Yeah, and the game kind of hints to you that it's something you can do because your mom actually comments that it was there was like a reminder in the paper or something that it's illegal to walk on telephone poles,
Yeah.
and then it's like, oh, cool, I can walk on telephone poles because you like as you wouldn't really think that necessarily you can do that because like if you did that you would die, but you know what I mean,
Yeah.
and
No,
it kind of like
you're a cat
pushes you,
person.
yeah, it pushes you in the direction of like this is something you can do. And since May is more of a rebellious in nature, um uh and does like minor petty crimes and stuff like that, uh you kind of like feel like, yeah, sure, this is something that I would do as this character. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a lot of mini games as well. The main one is the music mini game.
Which I did not like.
Yeah,
It's like a busted Guitar Hero.
it is like a very simple Guitar Hero. And
I wouldn't even say simple. I would say not as functional because I found it was not on beat.
mm, I
I
that's
found the rhythm
interesting.
was actually off.
Oh, okay. I found it was actually pretty well on the PC version. But the one thing that I'll say is like there's a couple songs where there's like repeated notes where it's just like the same note 10 times in a row, for example.
Yeah.
I generally almost always messed up on that part because like I clicked it too many times or stopped too soon or something like that. Yeah. One thing I would mention about the music mini game is I actually got tired of the music mini game to the point where I actually started ignoring it because you actually, whenever you wake up, you have the option to play May plays bass, and you have the option to just play through each of the songs to practice. And I was actually doing that like every single morning for probably the first 2/3 of the game. And then
Wow.
eventually, I was just like, you know what? I kind of don't care anymore. And it's like she's in a band, I get it, and she thinks she's bad, and you can practice to get better if you want, but like I kind of am at the point where
There's no advantage to getting better.
there's no advantage to other than like an achievement. There's
Yeah.
no advantage of getting better, and I just kind of want to see the story unfold instead of like basically spending time on this mini game. But
The
it,
songs were kind of cool though.
yeah, the songs were definitely
I
kind
will
of
say
cool.
that
Yeah.
they were pretty neat.
Did you play the little rogue game on the computer?
Yes, I
Mm-hmm.
didn't finish it, but
Yeah, neither did
I
I.
played some of it. It was actually kind of fun.
Yeah, apparently it has multiple endings as well. Yeah, there's like a good ending and a bad ending.
Okay.
I maybe played it for like the first night and made it to the third level, and I was just like, oh, okay, like I. I get it. She used to play video games, and this is an old game she used to play. That her computer's broken at the beginning of the game, and her friend's boyfriend he fixes it, and Angus, and he puts the game on there because he knows that she used to play it. And that was kind of cool for story purposes. And I thought it was kind of neat that they actually took the time to like put it in there instead of
Yeah.
just have it as a mention, like, oh, I used to play this, and there's some dialogue around that, and you could actually like play it and stuff like that. And then there's even some comments later in the game where it's like, oh, have you been playing the game? And then if you have been playing it, presumably then May says yes, but like in my playthrough where I hadn't been playing it, she's like, yeah, not really, but I did play it. And it's like, oh, okay, that's too bad. But yeah, so that was another interesting gameplay aspect. I guess the last main gameplay aspect of it are the dream sequences, and
They were a little bit more, slightly more intense platforming.
yeah, yeah, and definitely very interesting. Their sequence objectives, basically, in my opinion, served the purpose of setting May's mental state. And because every time you actually went through a dream sequence, it bothered the character, and her mental state basically deteriorated after every single dream. And you could very clearly see that where after every single dream, she essentially got worse and worse over time, with her like different mental instabilities and issues that she had,
Yeah.
which we'll go over later. But yeah. And it's interesting because as a player, I was wondering what was going on, and so was the character in the game. And it's just like yeah, it was an interesting parallel because they effectively basically made you feel the same way that the character is, because she's even commenting to her friends in the game that like these dreams are happening. You can choose not to tell them, and I didn't tell some of the friends, but like I like you can basically in the game choose to hang out more with one friend than the other, because you only have a certain amount of time, just
Yep.
like you do in real life. And yeah, eventually I opened up to the character I played with and told them like, oh, okay, like I've been having these weird dreams and like I'm uncertain as to what they mean. And as a player, it's like, yeah, they're weird. I'm uncertain as to what they mean too. And then after like the second and third one, it becomes clear that it's starting to drive her like mentally unstable a little bit.
Well, and even you can see the collapse of the level itself,
Mm-hmm.
because it starts out as a fairly,
Coherent.
yeah, and fairly simple platformer,
Mm-hmm.
which as it goes on, when you get into the, like, I want to say third or fourth, because I think there's four of them.
Yeah, there's
Well,
four
there's
of them.
four of a specific type. There's a bunch of dream sequences, but I think the one we're
Mm-hmm.
talking about has about four distinct types.
Yep.
And it breaks down,
Yeah, like the
and things are
buildings are on the side, and
yeah,
like
like
there's a
things are
train on the bottom of it,
askew,
and all
and
the trains are on, like the buildings are on the train, kind of, and
yeah,
it's
like
yeah,
it's just all over the place, and you can
and there's music playing in the background where you have to find the musicians playing the music, and then find the center of the level, and that basically completes the dream sequence. And every time you do that, there's like a weird animal, and it's kind of unclear as to whether that's just a euphemism for like her mental state or whether it's like a parallel to its astrological system, because they made up an astrological system for the game that you can discover with
with your science
your
teacher.
science teacher. It's probably a bit of both, but I saw that there was quite a bit of fan hypotheses about this on the subreddit. But yeah, it is really, really interesting.
So I guess next we'll sort of go over a few of the characters, just because we're gonna get into a little bit more of um
Yeah.
the meat of the story
Mm-hmm.
itself, and
And
that way
just so
then we're
you
not explaining.
Yeah, just so you understand who each of the main like four characters are.
So May, as we mentioned, is the main character.
Yep.
She's cat person,
Mm-hmm.
and returning home from college
Yep.
for reasons unknown.
Except for that she dropped out.
Yeah, except
Yeah.
for that she's dropped
But
out.
the exact reason you don't learn right away for sure.
No. And then you've got kind of her friends, Beatrice,
Yep.
who is a crocodile.
Mm-hmm.
You know a little bit more about Beatrice than I do.
Yeah, I actually played through the Beatrice path, and you played through the Greg
Greg.
path. Cups on my ears. But yeah, so Beatrice is one of May's former best friends. They basically drifted apart in the seventh grade. Beatrice literally basically lost everything due to family tragedy. Her mother died, and she was the valedictorian in her class. And she lost her mom due to cancer during her like years of graduation, essentially. And her father basically slips away into a depressive state, forcing Beatrice to basically forego her entire dreams and future. And she basically picks up the reins and starts running the family business because her father owns a hardware store in town. It's basically the hardware store in town.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's kind of the main points of Beatrice. And one interesting factor I found out about this is I think it's through the AMA was that this is actually one of the developers' favorite characters. They apparently really enjoyed making Beatrice and her backstory.
She was really like sassy,
Mm-hmm.
especially at the start, because it takes her
Yeah.
quite a while to warm back up to May, at least
Yeah,
for
because
me.
she doesn't like you fully like because there was that drifting apart, and through the playthrough you really have to basically reconcile that friendship again. And like later there's a scene where you eventually learn a lot about Beatrice,
Hmm.
and you go off to basically a college party, and you find out that she's kind of been doing this like once a month to kind of like it's kind of like her way to live the dream of the what could have been, essentially. And it's she knows it's kind of sad and thinks it's sad, but it's like the only thing that she has kind of she feels that she has going for her.
Yeah.
And during that scene, there's a really good moment where they have a good heart to heart, and they do really realize that they're maybe friends of circumstance due to the area of them both growing up in the same like neighborhood. Because Beatrice used to live in a house and then they lost it and they had to move to an apartment building, for example. But yeah, they are and can be really good friends to each other. Yeah, which I found really interesting. So, how about you go into Greg's?
Greg is he's a wolf person.
Yep.
He's May's best friend,
Mm-hmm.
and he's very excitable.
Yeah.
Uh,
He probably has ADHD.
yeah, oh, for sure, for sure. But he gets super excited really easily about like everything.
Yeah.
Kind of rebellious.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not so much anymore.
Yeah, you definitely gain the feeling that him and May used to be rebellious a lot together.
Yeah, like they used to get up to a lot of mischief in high school.
Yeah.
Whereas he probably hasn't so much
Mm-hmm.
now that they're past that.
Mm-hmm.
He works like 7 days a week at what's basically a 7-Eleven,
Yeah.
trying to save up a whole bunch of money,
Mm-hmm.
so he and his boyfriend can move to it's something harbor. It's like a bigger city.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, it's basically the town of the larger city that's like down the road, essentially.
yeah, they want to Bright Harbor.
Bright Harbor.
Yeah, because the town's really got nothing for him.
Yeah.
And like he and his boyfriend Angus are like the only gay people in town,
Yeah.
so they feel that,
Mm-hmm.
and that's which what was kind of interesting is you never really see that in the game. Like,
Yeah, the game actually handles these concepts really nicely because even May is pansexual, and the facts of like these people being these different identities is just kind of like It just is. They don't really make a big deal about it,
No.
and it doesn't feel like it's being shoehorned into the game. It's done in a very natural way where like it's just something that the characters know, and they don't
Yeah.
like try to brush around it in an awkward way or anything like that. It's just is, which is I think they handled that very very nicely because in my opinion it can be very annoying to the sense where it kind of feels forced. And the reason why is because it doesn't necessarily do those characters justice. Where it's just like, oh, we have to put in like this type of character, or we have to put in that type of character. And if you do it in a more natural way, then you don't really think about it, and it just is part of the game, and it is part of those characters.
Yeah, they're like that's
Hmm.
just their character.
Yeah, and they
Um,
did a really really good job of that.
whereas like in something like Life is Strange, you feel like they wanted you to make that relationship. You didn't feel like you could, like I didn't feel like I could just organically not have that relationship with Chloe.
Well, the difference I think in the two games is that you had a choice versus
Yeah, whereas
yeah.
but I feel like even though I had a choice, that was the choice that they were making for me.
Hmm.
Whereas like these are just the characters and they're just it. There's no like big explanation or big
Reveal or something like
reveal. It's
that.
just like, yeah, this is
Yeah.
it. And like I like they don't even really talk about May's like sexuality a lot.
Yeah, so it comes up in probably a scene that you didn't get. Because whenever you go to the one town where with Beatrice, where you go to the college party, she meets another girl there. And she complains that she didn't get her number and that she wants to get back, so maybe she sees her again to get her number. And that's where you find out. And then there's some comments in before where you find out that she used to have a boyfriend at the one party in the forest.
Yeah,
So
the
then,
party that
yeah,
yeah.
so you do find out that inadvertent, like indirectly, that she's like bisexual. It's confirmed that she's pansexual though. So
Oh, interesting.
yeah, yeah. But
But
that's how you find out about that, is just through the conversation of like she um kind of had like a good conversation with a woman in the party at the other town, and she used to have a boyfriend. So yeah, yeah. Want to go over Angus?
Angus, the bear,
Mm-hmm.
Greg's boyfriend, he works at the video store.
Yeah.
He's actually really quiet too.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's very quiet and not very expressive.
Yeah, he's a little disconnected from the group and others, but
Yeah.
very connected to Greg.
Yeah, extremely connected to Greg. He you don't really get to know him too much
Mm-hmm.
until quite a bit later in the game.
Yeah, and it's kind of a scene that you can miss, which
Yeah,
is
you for
sort of
sure could.
unfortunate because I feel that this scene is a really good one. And if you've played through the game, have not done the ghost quest with Greg, I highly recommend doing it because you learn a lot about his past that you wouldn't learn otherwise.
And there's some really good things that come out of that, and um, probably one of my like favorite quotes from the game
Mm-hmm.
is from Angus and is in that in that missable section.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we'll get into it a little bit later.
Mm-hmm.
But so we also have Germ,
Yeah.
who's a bird,
Yeah.
who's kind of weird,
He
who I never hung out with.
so you uh told me that you basically didn't hang out with Germ because you felt that if you did, it would progress the day.
Yeah, I thought it would because
Yeah.
every time you hang out with someone, that's your like activity for the day.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean maybe it's just my persona
Mm-hmm.
reflexes, but when you choose that activity, that's your activity.
Yeah. And
So I didn't want to miss out on a hangout with Greg.
yeah. And
by hanging out with
I
Germ.
actually inadvertently found out that if you hang out with Germ because I was like, oh, fine, I'll hang out with this guy. He seems pretty cool and he wants to do a neat activity. So I did a couple of things with him and I found out that it didn't actually progress the day and it just had an extra interaction event that happened during that day, and a couple of the other characters do too, that I started talking to him basically every day that I could and doing things with him just to get that content. And yeah, so he's one of Greg's good friends, and he actually lives in the forest outside of town, past the now closed grocery store.
In a treehouse.
Yeah, in a treehouse. And I missed the scene where you actually go to his home because I um I didn't do all of the conversations. I would have had to do the talk with him one day earlier to get all of them
Mm.
because it kind of, I guess, shifted by one day. And yeah, so but he's an interesting character because you can actually get to know him a little bit, and he basically is a character who really likes nature. He's really good friends with Greg, and he's kind of like an environmentalist a little bit. And he's actually, from what I understand, passed that on to Greg a little bit because Greg does mention a couple of times that he does drive his bike whenever he can to like help save the environment and whatnot.
I don't think Greg has his license.
No, he doesn't. But I'm not sure that would stop him from trying to drive a car.
Well, yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Also,
Uh,
Jerem is really good at video games. I do know that, and
mhm.
he loves playing video games.
Yes.
Particularly old video games.
Yeah, yeah. And the games like GTA.
Yeah, it sounded like GTA, but
Yeah.
with cameras too.
hmm
It was
Yeah.
weird.
Yeah. But yeah, that's one of the main characters, and he hangs out with the four main characters, kind of like as a fifth, and he always watches the bands practice, even though he doesn't think they're good, but
That's
he
true,
he
and it's
enjoys
not
watching
even
them.
it's not even a style of music that he likes.
Yep, because he more likes the
He likes black metal.
Yeah, black metal.
Specifically black metal,
Yeah,
which I was like, oh, that's kind of cool.
yeah, and but he likes going there to support, and he's always hanging out at both Angus and Greg's apartments after they work and stuff like that to hang out with them. All right, so let's move on and talk about both the graphics and the music. And let's talk about the graphics first. So, I think it's really important to mention that the game's color palette is very selective, and I found that really interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah, because
yeah, it
it
is.
starts off in the late summer, and it kind of ends in early winter. And it's kind of interesting because like fall is kind of the main month that it goes over, and fall is the time where all of the nature and stuff like that is kind of dying and going, like the trees are going dormant and everything. And if you look at what things are happening in May's life right now, it kind of parallels that,
Yeah,
and the colors and everything are very autumn themed through most of the game and very pretty. And there's the rainy days, and there's a lot of comments on how like there's a comment where May's mother doesn't like rainy days, but then May mentions, "Oh, I like rainy days. The days appeal to me," and stuff like that. The different color palettes that they use for these times and days and different locations are very selective
yeah.
and very well chosen, in my opinion. Like the example of the lighting for each of the different rooms, you get a nice effect of it looks like they use basically layering effects to get lighting. So if you're in the caves, for example, there's very little light and you kind of have a silhouette effect going on, and it emphasizes a feeling of darkness.
Or even at night in the forest,
Yep.
it's
Or
a lot
going in
of.
hallways with a little bit of light, it kind of uses the same thing. Yeah.
It's good. I mean, the art style is sort of minimal.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not.
It's interesting because it's not as minimal as Oxenfree because it has more detail than it, but it has kind of like a minimalist um uh approach to it for sure.
To me, they almost look like paper cutouts.
Yeah, definitely, like, yeah, cardboard cutouts.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's very much what I see.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it's very very like art projecty.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
it looks like it was someone's art project.
Mm-hmm. And the This game was actually supported through a Kickstarter initially, and if I recall correctly, it got like 400% of its initial goal, which was pretty
Yeah,
fantastic.
wow.
And I didn't actually know about the game whenever it was a Kickstarter, but I read that the artist actually used the extra money that they got from it that they received from the Kickstarter towards the actual art of the game, instead of making backer goals and saying, well, at this with this many goals and this with this many with this much money and this with this much money, and just keep on basically creating scope creep for themselves, because they were very cognizant and aware that if they did that, the game would never finish.
Yeah.
So they basically used the money in assets such as like the art, for example, so they could concentrate on it. Because I guess from what I understand, the art probably would have been a lot simpler if they didn't get all the money. Probably similar, but a little bit simpler. So I found that very interesting, and I'm very glad that they chose to focus on that aspect. The music.
I really enjoyed it. I mean, I enjoyed as much as I hated the rhythm mini game.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoyed the music that the band played.
Yep.
Um,
The lyrics are actually quite good too. If you read there's actually lyrics going across the bottom of the screen. It's hard to read
it is
them.
really hard to read and play bass successfully.
Yeah, but you can definitely find it. Like, it's on the wikia for the game. You can find all the song lyrics, and they're well written.
Yeah, and they're a lot of fun too. It's a lot of I mean it's punk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the
They're
music that they play is punk.
they're a
Yeah.
shitty punk band.
Yeah, yeah. But the music in the background definitely suits the game as well. It's a lot of shoegaze, dream pop, ambient music. You also do get some of the just generic, like, kind of instrumental tracks as well. And yeah, it's basically very, very subtle, and it's subtle in a nice way. And it's interesting how they select each of the different tracks in different locations, because it actually suits the pacing of the game quite well, in the atmosphere of the town and stuff like that, because it has like a main track that's played constantly in the different sections of the town. And it's interesting because it's kind of reminiscent of, because like I grew up in a small town, not like this, but and I grew up near a small city that is kind of like, it used to be manufacturing and stuff like that, and it no longer is. And it kind of is reminiscent of, it sort of reminds me of some like small town location and stuff like that for the
Well, and
different music.
like music wise, like there's there are sections, like serious sections in the game where there's no music,
Mm-hmm.
there's no ambient sound, and that it adds a punch
Yeah.
when there's nothing, like when it's totally dry, and it's just you get that like little bit of like murmur
Mm-hmm.
of the um dialogue,
Yep.
because there's no actual spoken dialogue, it's all text.
Yeah.
But they have like that little like
Yeah.
like sort of that
The
little
the as the text is appearing, you do hear like a very classical, like 16-bit era, like talking sound. Yeah.
yeah. And I don't know, I found that was good. They didn't try to like shoehorn in music
Mm-hmm.
in these like dramatic dialogue sections.
Yeah.
I mean, dramatic music in like a, I don't know, climactic action scene
Mm-hmm.
can really pull that together.
Yeah.
But I find like a lot like heavy dramatic music in like just a dramatic scene,
Mm-hmm.
it can sometimes pull you out a little bit
Yeah.
because you're a little bit too focused on the music as opposed to just taking in everything that's happening.
Yep.
But yeah, honestly a lot of good choices musically. Um, so I was surprised that there wasn't as much, um, I guess metal.
Because they
'Cause
mention it quite a
yeah,
few
like
times.
May specifically says that she really likes doom metal,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought that would have been a good. It
There's
could have.
there's one song that's really fast that's kind of like rocky, but it doesn't really sound all too metal.
No, and like doom is very specific and like
Yes.
low and kind of um slow.
Yeah.
So there was for sure some spots I thought it would have fit well,
Mm-hmm.
but I mean, overall, the music was great. I had zero complaints other than like one small, like, it would have been cool if this was in there, but everything else was still wonderful.
Hmm. So our next sections of the game may go over some minor or deep spoilers. So if you don't want to know, then I would recommend looking at the notes in the description and going to our final thoughts on the game. But without further ado, let's continue. So let's talk about some of the themes that the game goes over. So one of the constant themes that goes over the game goes over in basically all of the different areas which we talk about, but I think it's important to make a specific mention to this is one of the main themes of the game is May's friends and her friendship with different characters, and yeah, like I mentioned, we go over this in some of the other sections, but I think it's just important to make a distinction that this is one of the main themes that the games go over. And with that, one of the main things that kind of tie into this is that you actually have to make a choice like you do in real life on who you spend your time with. Because if you decide, I'm going to spend today with Greg, for example, in the game, you lose the opportunity to spend that day with Beatrice. It's not a game that allows you to do everything within one playthrough. You kind of have to make your choices like you do in
Yeah.
real life, because, and I like how they did that because it's very, very realistic. Because like maybe you're only available on Sunday nights or something like that, and I'm busy on Sunday nights because I work Sunday nights or something, and then we'll drift apart because we're not seeing each other as often, and the game goes over, maybe not in that explicit detail, but it kind of shadows those realities in the game playthrough.
Well, and too, I mean, it shows because like we had slightly different experiences because you focused more on being Beatrice's friend, whereas
Hmm.
I focused a little bit more on Greg. And yeah, I found that with Greg, it also kind of hit on our our relationship's impact
Yeah.
on ourselves as well as the people around us.
Hmm.
Um, because I mean, like I said earlier, you can really get that feeling that they were fairly rebellious in high school,
Yeah.
and then with May coming back, it started to kind of bring that side back out of Greg,
Hmm.
and it's like he wants to relive, I guess they're like high school glory days because now
Yeah.
he's working 7 days a week at a
Dead
like
end job,
yeah
basically. Yeah. And for context, like May is 20 and Greg is 21, so it's like they're just turning adult.
yeah.
Hmm.
So it's and
Like it's even commented like May can't buy alcohol. Is mentioned whenever you talk with some of the people outside of the bar, for example. They're like,
yeah,
she's like, she comments, "I'm an adult." It's like, well, can you buy alcohol? They're like, "No, I'm 20." And it's like, well,
not an adult.
yeah,
But no, you really get to see that impact because it does put a strain on Greg and Angus's relationship
mm,
because they have their own plans and dreams together,
yeah,
and that's based on how they are as people now.
hmm,
And, people grow and change over time. Like that's just a natural course of it. And it when you have someone who's trying to pull you back into what you used to be in, like
yeah,
it can strain things.
hmm,
So like as far as the friendships go, it was really interesting kind of to watch that unfold and see.
yeah. And we're on the parallel side. If you play through Beatrice's side, Beatrice is a little bit more grown up because she's kind of been forced to due to her circumstances that I explained before,
Hmm.
and she kind of brings May along with what she's doing. Like there's one scene, for example, that you are basically you get to choose what they have for dinner, and you go to the grocery store and May is excited, so to speak, just to kind of hang out and just do nothing. But then Beatrice is just like, well, this is just like mundane everyday stuff, right? And it's like, no, 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 let's do this. And it's like, are you super? Like, why are you superimposing on dinner? Like, I haven't really invited you and stuff like that. And the relationship's kind of a little bit constrained in that point, where it's kind of like you're sort of like um, forcing yourself upon the friendship a little bit, and I found that really interesting as that unfolded because it's kind of like Beatrice definitely does need a friend, and you can see that as you kind of like um, interact more with that character, and like you mentioned with Greg, like he has a reminiscent feeling for a yearning for the glory days essentially, and each of
Yeah.
their characters have their own like dynamic, which is like really really cool. Yeah. So one of the other aspects of the game that the game goes over, basically over the entire process of the game, is the depression, mental health, and dissociation disorder. I think I messed it up, but anyway, yeah. So it's very obvious that May has depression and anger issues. In fact, she's gone to counseling in the past for it, and you learn that her counselor has basically forced her to have a journal, and she basically draws pictures and bullet point notes in it. She thinks it's useless, but she does it anyway. And yeah, and she also arguably has dissociation disorder. Sorry, I'm butchering that. And you can see that because she mentions that she sees, or saw at least, people as shapes and wants to feel some sort of empathy towards them, and she doesn't. And basically, she beats up a kid with a bat for no reason. And that's kind of the impression that everybody in the town has of her.
Yeah.
And that's the impression that everybody of the town has of her, like minus her actual like few friends whenever she comes back, and it's like, oh yeah, you're the person who did this, and you went to college and you just kind of went back, and it doesn't really help her situation any because she's going through a lot of different things. And yeah, the different events kind of point to uh, over time what happened in her past, from the event where she beat up some kid and then basically was forced to go to counseling from it, to why she actually dropped out of college. And yeah, it's kind of hinted and hinted over time, where eventually you get like all the pieces of the puzzle, not necessarily all the pieces of them, but like
A lot
enough
of them.
to put it together where you're like, oh okay, yeah. And I'll call it Do, but the dissociation disorder. Why am I saying that wrong?
Disassociative?
Yeah, it's this. Yeah, disorder. It basically is a lack of connection in personal thoughts, memory, and a sense of identity. Generally, which is developed over like, from what I understand, very high stress or trauma. In her case, I guess it's stress. Because I don't really feel that she has
Yeah, they
much
don't
trauma that's not stress induced.
yeah, they don't really go over any kind of traumatic events in her
Yeah,
past. I mean, she does
she.
complain about like frequent migraines.
Hmm. Yeah, which is side effects of a lot of these disorders. And like she got like trauma. Arguably, she lost her grandfather, so like that is traumatic and stuff like that. But yeah, everybody experiences things differently. But yeah, yeah,
The depression I found kind of interesting because you can see that in a lot of the characters throughout the game.
yeah.
Um,
Especially being in basically an economically rundown town.
yeah, you know, no one no one seems overly happy
Hmm.
except maybe Greg.
Yeah.
But I think that's just his nature. I think he's just
But even so, he mentions in the game that he's never really sure until the end of the day whether or not it was a good day or not.
that's
And
true.
he's kind of living like each day as it comes. And I think that's kind of attributed to like his personality and lifestyle. Because he basically works 7 days a week, and is very carefree, and he just leaves work whenever he wants and stuff like that during
Well,
his
yeah.
shift. But
Now, I don't know. I don't think that's something he necessarily does often. I think that's something that he starts doing when May comes back.
yeah,
Again, the May being the bad influence
yeah, they're
on
kind of
Greg.
perhaps a bad influence on each other, but and then Angus was a good influence on Greg, and then now it's kind of like brought back to the old level.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Because generally, like that's sort of why I liked hanging out with Greg was because most of the time I'd go and meet him at work,
Hmm.
and we would leave
Yeah.
work like in the middle of his shift and go do something stupid
Yeah.
like knife fighting and there was a he would throw like fluorescent lights at me
Hmm.
and I would smash them with a baseball bat,
Yeah.
like stuff like that. Like it
And
was
they're like supplies for the store.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
there were lights for the store. And then like it was and then we would do some like crimes together.
Yep.
Crimes.
Yep.
Yeah, no, like it was a lot of dumb fun stuff,
Hmm.
but all stuff that probably could have got him in a lot of trouble.
Hmm.
And I don't feel like it was stuff that he would have been doing otherwise. I feel like he and Angus had a fairly pedestrian kind of life.
Hmm.
A lot of pizza and movies.
Yeah.
Which I mean, there's nothing wrong with that.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah, and in my playthrough, there is one night where Greg doesn't want to hang out, even though like May asks about it, and she's like, "Well, no, it's like our movie night," and it's
yeah.
very like a thing that they do.
Yeah. In my playthrough, I actually had a night where I unintentionally imposed myself upon their date,
Oh, okay.
and instead of them doing what they wanted to do, we went to I think Donut Wolf.
Oh, okay.
I think it was called Donut Wolf,
Hmm.
and got donuts. And there was a big argument that happened, and but yeah.
Hmm.
Um. Anyways, moving on. Loss
Hmm.
was another fairly major theme throughout.
Yeah.
Not just with not just loss of like family members and friends.
Yeah.
Um, it's that it's people letting go of their dreams.
Hmm.
Um, like loss of like lifestyle.
Yeah.
It's I
Loss of
mean,
innocence of childhood.
yeah, it was um
Friends and family. Just a lot of different types of loss. So I think whenever people think about loss, they're generally thinking about like death.
yeah,
And this game, I think, emphasized the fact that like loss is a lot more, and it like the one of the ways that I see it is like you mentioned, just kind of letting go or moving on from what you thought might have been or
yeah,
what you wanted in life, because the reality of the situation, unfortunately, for some circumstances, is that you can always attempt to do what you want, but then sometimes things just get in the way and those opportunities kind of push aside due to like life choices that you've made, and sometimes it's not necessarily something that you wanted to do, and it might not have been forced on you, but like it's just something that you felt that you had to like kind of go through, or it was kind of just the motions. Beatrice is a good example of this because she also wanted to go to college, and one of the biggest things that she resents, which you talk about in a different theme that it goes over with May, is that she dropped out, and she sees that as something that she lost because the fact that she didn't have that opportunity because her mother died, her father went into a depressive state, and basically she was almost like forced upon to pick up the her shoes and take over the business without actually being the business owner. Otherwise, they would have lost that business potentially, and everything. And if she didn't do that, then she would have like felt guilty that her father probably would have started living on the street, for example,
Yeah.
because he basically lost it whenever he lost his wife due to um, I forget if it was cancer. I think it was
I
from
think it was
cancer.
cancer.
Yeah, yeah,
I didn't get as close to Beatrice, but I feel like I heard that at
yeah.
some
I'm pretty
point.
sure it was cancer.
But
Yeah.
I mean, I had a similar, well, not similar, but I did have, an interaction with Greg that was along the same lines. And it's just like, he, like, Greg doesn't think he's anything.
Mm-hmm.
He refers to himself as like parking lot trash,
Yeah.
and that if it wasn't for Angus, he wouldn't have any chance of getting anywhere,
Mm-hmm.
and that's like he sees their relationship as his ticket out, and if they didn't have that,
Mm-hmm.
he would just be nothing. He doesn't even think he's a good person. It's and I guess it's tough at that age, especially if you don't necessarily have the opportunity to move on, um, to like a college or university. When you get out and you just have to keep working in the same town that you grew up in.
Yeah.
But even worse, like there's no jobs,
Mm-hmm.
other than minimum wage kind of
Yeah.
things where now.
The main industry in Possum Springs was the mine, and it closed down, and its local economy basically shut down because of that. And that's one of the large undertones in the game, is basically that loss of the local economy. And um, uh,
Yeah, now you have all these like displaced workers,
mm-hmm.
um, that are trying to get into any kind of work.
Yeah.
And I know we're moving on to a whole new point here,
Yeah.
but you get, you have someone like May's dad,
Mm-hmm.
who has like I think he says he's worked like 4 or 5 different jobs
Yeah.
recently,
Yeah, he
and
was a miner, glass worker, and
like those were the ones that he liked.
yeah.
Um, and now he hates his job,
Mm-hmm. He
and
basically works at the local like Walmart in like the meat section, cutting meat slices for people.
yeah, and he hates it.
Mm-hmm.
He hates his job. He hates his
Yeah,
boss.
he's very open about the fact that he hates his job at the end of the game. I'm not sure if you would have gotten that dialogue if you would have ignored him throughout the game, but
No, probably not.
yeah, but yeah,
Neither of us ignored our parents.
yeah.
Spoiler alert. But
Yeah.
no, it's tough. Like you've got a lot of people who are looking for work. The
There's a cat.
Selmer, I
Hmm.
think,
Oh, yep.
who we mentioned earlier. She's the
She's the
poet.
poet.
She talks about how she's worked several different jobs.
Yeah, she seems to basically job hop quite a bit because she's worked like a lot of different places, almost
Yeah.
like everywhere in town, basically.
And it getting to know her a little bit, it sounded like at one point she actually had a home,
Hmm.
but now she's like, it was like then into an apartment, and now she's like back at her parents' place, sleeping
Living
in
in the
their
basement.
basement.
Yeah.
And yeah, like she's the same age, if not like a year or two older than May.
Hmm.
And that's tough. Like you don't want to have to, I guess, regress like that.
Yeah.
Once you've made that progress and you're out on your own and you have your own home, to like, okay, well, I've got to, I have to downsize now to an apartment.
Hmm.
Okay, I can't afford the apartment anymore. I've got to move back in with my parents.
Yeah, because it's a very real circumstance for people who basically have been like their jobs have been displaced, or the area's economic is the area is economically in turmoil because of the industries closing down and stuff like that due to different
It's
reasons.
just
And
obsolescence almost.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
like the mines aren't safe, um, or like coal mining's just not as
relevant anymore.
yeah. And if they if an industry doesn't change, obviously it's just gonna become obsolete, and then that there's just a void now,
Yeah.
as opposed to something naturally taking that place.
And even the fact that like they mentioned there's the new highway that's near the town that kind of passes it, and you kind of get the feeling where, and I'm sure everybody like our age and older, and a little bit younger, like basically like if you're mid 20s and higher, you probably realize this, like whenever new highways are built around towns, like sometimes it takes away from that town because it's kind
Yeah,
of like, well, I don't like, I can now like take that to go to the larger supermarket or something like that, and that's basically what everybody's doing in the town, and it's caused many different towns in the downtown core of this small town to basically close up because the old grocery store is closed down, the
yep.
pizza place did
Closes down. There's a
the
party place that closes down.
yeah.
Even some of the businesses you see
Mhm.
like start closing down as the game goes on, and it's
Yeah.
just it it's surprising to see something so real
Mhm.
in a video game and discussed so like open and honest.
Yeah, because like I can really only think of, like, I'm sure there's quite a few examples, but like the prime ones that I would say are just like this one and Life is Strange, because there's aspects of joblessness in both of them where just things aren't necessarily going well, but not as much as in this game, because this game definitely it hits hard there.
Yeah.
And I think it being like like I mentioned earlier in the episode, the two writers like grew up in a small Pennsylvanian town, and that's in the Rust Belt, and like that this has affected the Rust Belt a lot. Even with, like, we live in southwestern Ontario, and there used to be a lot more manufacturing in this area, and some of the towns here in like the 80s and 90s had a lot more, like we had a steel industry, and it's almost like fully gone, and stuff like that in the
Yeah,
area and
you
whatnot, and a lot of this like factories and stuff like that have closed down, and it's all like switching over to tech and things like that. um
yeah, we've been fortunate enough to see, industry evolve in our area, but a
right,
lot of
but all those trained workers who like grew up or like moved into those trades, like there might be 1,000 people who are available, but there's only like 200 jobs in the area, right? For that one.
yeah,
So you have the surplus amount just displaced and out of work. And
and not every place is as open and willing to, retrain and
hmm
um
yeah.
yeah, it it really hit hard.
hmm
That was a
Yeah.
that was kind of a big one. But I mean, sort of on that note of the displaced workers and the joblessness, that kind of pulls into the one of the next major themes,
hmm
which was uh debt.
Yeah.
And that got super real. And like
hmm
it's not really discussed for a little while, and probably you would totally miss it if you didn't talk to your parents.
Yeah, you probably would, because um, I I guess we're not 100% certain if you're forced to talk with your mom if you just leave, but if you do talk with your mom, so May wakes up at like 3:30 in the afternoon every single day, and she probably goes to bed at like 4 a.m. But because it's
I mean,
mentioned
maybe.
she sleeps for like 10 hours or something like that.
That's true, yes.
But whenever you're talking with May's mom, you find out that like she actually took out a second mortgage. Her and her father took out a second mortgage to help May pay for her school, and it was
Because they had to, I mean, because it's America,
hmm
and they don't, well, it's America, animal America.
yeah.
Um, I'm assuming that they don't have some kind of like uh, healthcare program,
hmm
because they mentioned that they had to put out a lot of money to cover the costs of,
Her grandfather.
well, and the issues that she had,
Yep.
which would be her um, the therapy
Yep.
sessions that she would have had to go through.
hmm
That would have been incredibly expensive, and that would have really cut into any sort of college fund that they would have had for May.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
then I guess her mom's handed an opportunity by a bank.
hmm And it turned out to be basically a bad loan,
Yeah.
where it wasn't really advantageous at all, because the interest rates. Like they don't specifically say why, but essentially, like if you're not sure what a bad loan is, basically it's low interest for a certain period of time, and then eventually it skyrockets, and it's very hard to pay back. And
Yeah, because
that's a sky level view of it, obviously.
she
But
mentions that they're now paying more for their house than what it's worth,
mm-hmm.
and
And they don't think
realistically,
they'll ever pay it back.
they don't know how much longer they can stay there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's again, like, that's a pretty real discussion.
Yeah, and May is specifically told whenever her mom gets mad that they specifically did this to try and give May a future, and the relationship is sort of strained between the two of them because, like, there's sort of a little bit of resentment there because it's like, well, like, we did all of this for you and you just don't care.
Well, she was supposed to be the first one to go to college.
Yeah.
The first one in her family to go to college.
And then May is just like, okay. And she just doesn't get it. And there's reasons why she doesn't get it, but it's kind of unfortunate and a little sad, but it's kind of the reality. And there's definitely people out there that are like that. And even to an extent, like I had to take a loan to go to school and stuff like that myself. But yeah, I was just like, yeah, it's money, I'll pay it back. And it took a really long time to pay it back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, debt's not fun, and it's scary, and it's
yeah, it definitely can change your life. It's definitely life altering. Yeah.
Again, like it's another like heavy theme.
Yeah, because
this game just kind of throws at you.
Because her parents did all that to shield her from all of these like harsh realities of life and shelter her from it, and it's very obvious that she has been because she has no apparent concept of some of the realities of these because she doesn't care whether or not she has a job. She doesn't care that she doesn't have money because she has a place to live and her friends are buying her
like
stuff.
she even references at one point that she had a job once and
yeah, baking groceries.
I think Greg was like, "When did you have a job?" Like, you've never had a job.
Yeah.
And yeah, like realistically, she's probably never worked.
Yeah. She mentioned in my playthrough that she used to bag groceries. So maybe she did during one summer.
For a couple of days.
So another big theme that the game goes over is not fitting in. And it's kind of emphasized because you realize with the interaction of each of the different people in the town that May doesn't really understand where she fits in. She's 20. She doesn't really belong. She doesn't feel like she belongs anywhere anymore because college didn't work out. She tries to talk with a few kids in the town who are basically the teenagers who are in high school because she just kind of like graduated from that like a year or two ago. And
they're like, "You're too old."
Yeah, like they don't care. Some of them definitely do converse with her and stuff like that, and find out that like she's interesting and back and forth. But most of them are just like, "You're old. Like, why do we care? Like, go away." And she's like, "I'm only 20," but then she's using the exact inverse excuse for adults and saying, "I'm 20. Like, I'm an adult," and she's definitely in that.
And they're like,
transition
"No, you're
period.
not an adult."
Yeah. You don't know anything.
It's tough. Like that is a really tough time because you don't know quite where you fall. Like you're too old to be a teenager.
Yeah.
And you're not old enough for adults to be like, "You're an adult."
And I feel that one of the reasons why she kind of like looks towards the teenagers to maybe try and fit in there is because a lot of the characters in the game know who she is and associate her with the event that happened in her childhood with the beating up of the kid, and they know that she went to college, and they're all like, "Oh, you dropped out," and like none of us have that opportunity or have had that opportunity, and they really kind of resent her for that, and she kind of steps back away from those people, I feel, because of that, and then she basically is displaced from adulthood and childhood, and from those reactions from the people, and then it's only specific individuals who actually do open up to her, and she can open up too, throughout the experience of the game, that basically emphasize the fact that yeah, she kind of doesn't fit in and in with the game. In with the characters of the game. Yeah, one line that's kind of like my favorite line in the game that I feel that a lot of um, it's made at the end of the game, and I feel it's one of the largest contributors to the not fitting in and our generation, which is like mid millennials and up to people who are just turning into adulthood, is I don't even understand life. I think you get taught that you have a lot more control of the world than you do. And from my experiences and a lot of my friends' experiences and from experiences I've seen from people who are our age and stuff like that, this quote really hit home and is a big, like, kind of full circle realization of a lot of the aspects of this game and the displacement and the loneliness and the depression and not fitting in and not really understanding where you're supposed to be in life and stuff like that because of worker displacement and a lot of the other things. For me, that's kind of like one of the best moments in the game, I would say.
Yeah, that one hit pretty hard too. That
Yeah,
was a
and it's really I thought it was not just only a really great quote, but a really great moment to have the quote because it did happen right after the climax of the game where you kind of find out everything about the situations of why people are disappearing and stuff. And yeah, it was really well written. So um, as we kind of brushed over before, there's the aspects of resentment in this game.
you kind
Yeah.
of get it from May's parents a little bit. I mean,
Yeah.
not too much. Like they're not.
More her mom than her father, because her father is more nonchalant and not as pressing, I would say, as her mom. And because her mom kind of wants to try and understand, and I'm sure her father does too. But
Her father comes across as a lot more stoic,
hmm
whereas her mom is a lot more emotional.
yeah,
And apparently May's a lot more like her mom.
yeah, except in the aspects of being a troublemaker, she gets that from her father
Yeah.
apparently. Yeah, or her grandfather specifically too.
But
It
then
it
you
runs in the
Right.
that side of the family.
But you do get a little bit of the resentment from like other townsfolk,
hmm
as well as like even your friends to some degree,
hmm
because you were the one that got out,
Yeah.
whereas they all had to stay here,
hmm
and then you gave up that opportunity and came back.
Yeah. Yeah. And the aspect of resentment is kind of the major aspect that you get whenever you do Beatrice's playthrough. And this basically is the major tension point between the two of them because they had fallen out before, as I mentioned, in grade 7. And whenever she comes back and then tries to basically um, reinteract and mingle with Beatrice tells her about her May about her issues and troubles with her father and the store and everything. And May's advice basically is kind of very blatant, and it's not really anything that coincides with any realities or that Beatrice is kind of living through. Where May just suggests like basically just leave and just take over the business from your dad, which isn't necessarily something that she can do. That Beatrice gets mad at May for doing, or for saying, I should say, and it strains them even further because of it. And you see this with them ongoing throughout their interactions as you play together because it's the big thing where she wanted to go to college as well but wasn't able to, as I've already mentioned, due to things that happened. And like, sure, she could have just left, but like, is it really the right moral thing to do? And that's kind of what um, Beatrice's stance is on it, because she doesn't want to just abandon her father,
Yeah.
right? And if she did, that would have been a bad thing for her to do. Like, sure, like Greg, for example, has a distant and strained relationship with his parents, from my understanding, and maybe he would have done something like that, where he just would have left and stuff. But like, that's more appropriate for him in comparison to Beatrice, because like her father realistically would have started probably living on the street, and then they would have lost all business, and then probably would have put them in even more massive amounts of debt and stuff like that. And it's just not a realistic expectation to just like drop it and leave. And yeah, you see that sometimes in interactions with certain people, where they just don't necessarily understand why people have done certain decisions and stuff like that. And they're very naive to it. And it was really interesting to see that interaction between the two of them, because it put those two um, it put those two aspects of character together to show those interactions. And it was very very real. Yeah, yeah. Um,
But there's one other like kind of heavy theme that we didn't mention
hmm.
yet, and that's the idea of faith,
Oh yeah.
which they do go over quite a bit. Between May's mom working at the church,
Hmm.
the interactions that you can have with the pastor,
Hmm.
who I thought was really wonderful, as well as a lot of other interactions with your friends and other characters,
Yeah.
and they're just having, I guess, fairly honest discussions with them on faith
Hmm.
and religion. Um, I thought that was really interesting.
Hmm.
Um, that Yeah, I mean, you have the whole pastor, I guess, storyline where she's trying to open up the church to let um, a homeless man who's kind of moved into town,
Yeah, I think his name is Bruce.
Bruce. I
Yeah.
think. Oh yeah, I think it's Bruce.
Hmm.
And she wants him to be able to, sleep in the church.
Yeah, because they have all the extra space, and they're not using it, so why not
Let him stay there.
yeah, why not let him stay there?
Whereas, like, the city council is just totally opposed to it. They don't want.
Yeah.
They think opening up the church to one homeless person is going to bring in every single homeless person in the area, and that's
Hmm. Which is always a mentality that you see with decision making, where it's like, well, if we open the floodgates,
yeah, everyone's going to come in,
yeah.
and now then we're just going to have tons, and instead of taking this opportunity to take care of a person,
Hmm.
um, we're just not going to bother
Yeah.
and let the problem handle itself. And I mean, the way it the way it unfolds is very, again, real,
Hmm.
but very sad.
Yeah.
And you really feel you really feel for the pastor.
Yeah, because she goes through the entire effort of trying to set this up, and she basically doesn't feel that it will do anything, but she's trying anyway. And Bruce really appreciates the help that the pasture is giving him. And it's just he kind of realizes, and the pastor does like acknowledge that she later didn't think that it would do anything anyway, but she felt that she still had to try,
Yeah.
because she felt it was the right and righteous and good thing to do.
Well, that was the first time I met the pastor. She said, I think you say hey twice to her,
Hmm.
and she said, "Do me a favor, take that second hey and take it over to Bruce over there."
Yeah,
She tells you to just to go say hi to him.
yeah, that's why I
Basically
went to
treat
go
him like a
find him.
human being.
Hmm.
And I went and talked to him too.
Yeah,
You
because
know.
you learn a lot of things about his past, like he allegedly has a family, and he lost his job, and he used to also be like a worker through like it was a mine or some sort of industrial job, and he got displaced, and now he just moves from town to town, basically trying to live his life, And yeah, you know, like everybody who is homeless or displaced in
I
life
mean,
was
really,
someone and is someone.
he just seems to be looking for an opportunity to get back on his feet,
Mhm.
and he's yet to find it.
Yeah.
And I found it interesting that, um, I found it interesting that they really leaned on the pastor as the sort of pivotal character in that,
Mhm.
and that she was really the driving force behind trying to, do something good. Which, I mean, yes, as the head of the church, that was kind of, you would hope that that would be something that they would do. But
Mhm.
I also found it interesting that the church itself had no crosses on it whatsoever.
Yeah, it was
There was none of your typical,
well even the
like,
holy figure that's
oh,
on the
that's,
statue. It's not it's like a bird.
it was Saint something. I
Yeah.
can't remember his name, but he breathed fire
Mhm.
and ate people, I think. Because they do talk about it at one point,
Yeah, whenever you're discovering the stars and stuff.
and the uh, the pastor mentions something about, learning things from that, and you can say something either about, like, what, learn to breathe fire or learn to eat people.
Mhm.
And I mean, obviously that's not where she was going with it, but
Mhm.
no, I found it really interesting that they had very open discussions about faith, about God.
Mhm. Yeah, because May can kind of like sort of decide, because there's even a scene in the dream sequence where she thinks she saw God,
Yeah, and you can,
and
like, tell people, like, I'm pretty sure I talked to God.
yeah, and you or you can say like I'm unsure of what it was, and you talk to the pastor about that dream as
That
well.
was one of my favorite discussions.
Yeah, and it's like, well, what do you think it was? And the pastor was very critical of getting May to come to her own conclusions, and not necessarily sort of like shoehorning in an ideology down her throat. Where it was important to her to sort of realize, because you even talk with the pastor and you find out that she doesn't necessarily fully believe, and then May accuses her of basically, like, well, you're up there preaching every Sunday and you only 70% believe. Like, what the, like, what, I mean, I'm supposed to
That
believe?
and like I said, that was one of my favorite discussions, because
Yeah.
she's like, "Well, yeah, sure, I can get up there every Sunday and say, 'Hey, this week I'm like 60% in,
Hmm.
um, and here's my sermon.'" But she's like, "That is not going to help anybody. Like, that
Yeah.
doesn't there's no there's no
Yeah, she was more about like like the aspects of the religion, of the community, and the hope, love, and peace of the religion is the like the morals that she wanted to necessarily push forward and not.
yeah, less like there's someone physically up in the clouds above us
Yeah.
who's judging our every action."
Mm-hmm.
Um yeah, I found that really, really fascinating. And but I one of my favorite quotes later on in the game was from Angus,
Mm-hmm.
when you are talking, I mean, you're looking at the various constellations and that, and you do have a conversation about God. And I loved Angus's, I believe in a universe that doesn't care and people that do.
Yeah.
Um
Yeah, because it goes to those concepts of basically being good, and instead of necessarily just believing God.
exactly, like he refers to people as pattern seekers,
Mm-hmm.
that we want. That's why we see shapes in constellations.
Mm-hmm.
That's why that's why we draw these connections with religious experiences. We want to find patterns in things.
Mm-hmm.
And that quote was definitely one of my favorites. It just kind of it it stuck with me.
So, what are your final thoughts on the game?
um it's it's worth a playthrough. It's probably 10 hours of your life, um which I'm sure you would watch a series of something or a season of something
Mm-hmm.
that's 10 hours, that's atrocious. And you'd be like, ugh, I hated that season, but I watched all of it.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, just don't watch, one of the seasons of The Office like a 14th time and just play through this because
Or play this while The Office is on in the background.
I mean, that's also an option too.
Might make the game a little less depressing.
But, it was just, for me, when I met Greg, I was like, okay, cool. I'm going to hang out with Greg a lot because he's high energy. He kind of reminded me a little bit of myself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then just, talking with him and, seeing how he's struggling to grow as a person.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he wants to be a good person, but he really doesn't think he's worth anything. Um, he wants to be there for Angus, but at the same time, he knows that Angus could go anywhere and do anything,
Mm-hmm.
and he couldn't. He doesn't think he could do that.
Right.
He just thinks he's garbage.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and with May coming back into town, kind of falling back into his old ways and being mischievous and getting into trouble. When you're in your 20s, that's a lot more dangerous.
Yeah.
And then it's pulling you back from the person that you've started developing into, and now Angus, who sees you as this person who's growing, is seeing you fall back into what you used to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that it really strains their relationship. And it's just I had so many great conversations with Greg that was like May leave me alone and let me grow as a person.
Mm-hmm.
Like, don't not necessarily leave me alone, but like stop pulling me into doing crime with you.
Right.
Like, let's hang out, let's have fun, but I need to grow and I need to develop.
Mm-hmm.
And even getting into the like, am I worthy of being a person?
Right.
Am I worthy of this? Am I worth anything?
Mm-hmm.
It was a lot deeper. I know you were not interested in the Greg storyline because you thought it was going to be more of a losing a friendship thing.
The main reason why I didn't play the Greg storyline is because I saw immediately that he was basically regressing from potentially where he was sitting at to what he used to be like, because he basically was reminiscing of all of those things.
Yeah.
And I felt like I didn't really want to experience bringing a character down like that. Because I've seen that a couple instances in my actual life where like it really bothered me. So I kind of like geared away from that. I'm gonna say like in those respects, like Beatrice's storyline isn't any like better in those regards of like happiness, but because it's pretty depressing on the other sides of the playthrough, but just as interesting. But I definitely did watch through some of the other options in the game that related to Greg, just so I could experience them. And I was definitely wrong about some of stuff, of my opinion. Yeah, but
There was a lot of interactions I had with Greg that hit real
hmm
close to home for me.
yeah,
And um yeah, I mean, I I found this more emotional than Life is Strange, and I think it's because I could identify with this a lot easier.
hmm
I think anybody who's either around that time in their life or past that,
hmm
uh, there's going to be a lot of things in this that are going to kind of hit home,
yeah, yeah.
and um, yeah. I don't. What are your kind of final thoughts on this, JC?
So, although the ending was abrupt, I did find it interesting. It kind of ended the way that it began. And I honestly thought that something else was going to happen. However, after I saw I experienced the end of the game, I did look at the rating, and it's rated T versus rated M. And what I thought might have happened in the game is kind of more of an M rating. But I thought it might have went over some aspects of suicide, um, to put it shortly. But yeah, just because I thought it was kind of like maybe it was my own personal bias towards some of the aspects of the themes that the game was going over. But that I kind of thought they might have started going that way, but they didn't, thankfully. But yeah, so um, I would say the game is definitely worth a playthrough, as you said. But personally, I don't really think that the game will appeal to people who aren't within a certain age demographic. And explicitly, what I mean by that are mid to late millennials to people who are just coming upon adulthood now. People who are younger probably wouldn't necessarily understand the themes that are going in the game, like tweens or mid teenagers. You probably have to be like going into college. In my well, I definitely am wrong in certain circumstances in this. I fully acknowledge that some people develop differently and quicker than other people, but I would say like that target demographic would appreciate it more.
Yeah,
Older
there's a
people,
lot of heavy themes
yeah,
that really kind of hit close to home for anyone within that age demographic.
yeah. And so it was nice that there was two main potential playthroughs. So as we've gone over, you can basically play through Greg or Beatrice. And you played through Greg, and I played through Beatrice. And inadvertently, we didn't talk about what we were going to play through. We just naturally did those playthroughs.
Though there was an interesting point that you brought up. You, when you started playing, you said, "Oh, I think Ian's probably gonna end up doing most of the Greg stuff, so I'll just
Yeah.
focus more on Beatrice."
Yeah, that was um one of the reasons why that, and I didn't really want to, as I mentioned before, to really play through that, because as I mentioned before, I couldn't play this game in one setting. I had to put it down, and then I went and watched the new Stranger Things, and then came back to it, and just like played it over the course of a few days. Yeah, so a main reason why I played through the Beatrice playthrough was because I've had a friendship in the past that kind of went off the rails due to certain circumstances, and this kind of had the same aspect to it, and I kind of wanted to know how they handled that situation. So that's the main reason why I played through this one, because I felt like I was going to be able to relate to it a lot closer. And although some of the things that happened to Beatrice are certainly different than the circumstance that I'm personally lived through, it was definitely interesting to see something similar in a video game. And the one thing that I would say that I highly disliked of the game was that they mention, so you never actually see May's parents in the same room, except for a couple of times in the game. One of them being whenever May wakes up from basically almost dying in the church. She wakes up in the church. That's not where she almost died. That was in the forest. But anyway, so they speak about the parent, all three of them, her parents and May, speak about how they should sit down as a family and have a dinner, and they're going to do breakfast for dinner like they used to in the past. And they never actually have that scene. And I kind of, in my opinion, that's fine. It didn't really need to, but felt like people probably would have really enjoyed experiencing the interactions in that scene, because there was a lot of constraint, and uh, probably the father's side of the situations where he spoke with May during the night, and you do learn that the mother and the father are talking like in between while May's not around and stuff like that, and there's some resentment on the mother's side and stuff, and it would have been interesting to kind of have that closure. You can assume that that happens in the future, but sometimes things look hopeful, but they don't necessarily always happen because things just kind of in this game is kind of emphasizes reality a lot, and I see reality as like May might just regress back to her ways that she's currently, but in a better sense. And eventually Greg and Angus will leave, and she might just start hanging out with Beatrice and stuff like that. So I would have at least liked to actually have um, that scene in there, because a lot of the aspect of the dialogue with the parents was a lot of resentment from the mother's side.
Yeah.
And there's even the scene where they're not speaking with each other because her mom just gets really really mad because her daughter just doesn't understand and really isn't listening or trying to understand, and her mom is trying to explain to her like why like this is a thing and this is how life works, and she's just like, okay, whatever, I don't care. So I felt that that scene, to me, it would have been appreciated. um so it if this was an option in the game, um I didn't see it. I looked for it and I didn't see any evidence that it existed. If you know of any, please link me to it because I would like to see it. Because I don't feel like I'd play through the game again. But I'm certainly thankful that I did because it was a very enjoyable game. And like I said, it was more interesting than fun. And yeah, the game essentially goes over the facts that life can and does suck, and you don't necessarily always get what you want, and like things happen,
That you have zero control
yeah,
over.
zero control over. And it's because of this that I give the game, that this game will speak to you out of 10. And that's my final thoughts
That's
on
your
the
final thoughts.
yeah.
Well, I mean, that's our thoughts on A Night in the Woods. What did you guys think? Did you play it? Let us know in the comments. And yeah, we'll see you next Wednesday.
See you next time.